Hi everyone, welcome to Liberty Park Music. My name is West and I'll be your instructor for this lesson. Today we're going to look at a piece called Bees in the Clover by the Belgian composer and pianist Jean-Louis Goberts, who's better known by his nom de plume, Louis Streabogg. Now this is another etude style piece that focuses on one of my favorite techniques at the piano, playing consecutive thirds, which can be a little tricky to master given that our hands are not exactly ideal tools for the task. We're going to talk about why this is and what we can do to overcome it, and then provide some tips and strategies on what you can do to get your third sounding clean and musical. But first, let's give this piece a listen. So we can pretty easily see that the ability to play these consecutive thirds is obviously the big takeaway point from this piece. So we're going to talk about some specific things for you to think about to play these as smoothly and as cleanly as possible. Now, as it turns out, playing consecutive thirds like this, and by consecutive thirds I mean thirds that are played across the handspan, with fingers 1 and 3 followed by 2 and 4 and then 3 and 5 or vice versa, is one of the trickier techniques to execute, and there are a few reasons for this. As you can see, our hands are not built in a straight line. We have this natural curvature to the fingers, and in addition to this, our fingers are not anatomically built to function as completely equivalent digits. Some fingers are stronger than others, and they're all slightly different lengths, which means that we're naturally going to have to manage some digital inconsistencies, digital meaning our digits, when attempting to play any two notes together. This challenge is even more noticeable when playing predominantly on the white notes, as we tend to have to curve our fingers more tightly into their natural arc to achieve contact with the keyboard. This, by the way, is why some educators, perhaps most famously Chopin, have voiced a preference for having their students start with more ergonomically friendly keys like A major or B major, which allow our fingers to be up on the black notes, which works better ergonomically for our finger curvature. So just to demonstrate, go ahead and put your right hand into a close position on any of the white notes of the piano. And try and play a consecutive line of thirds up from your first and third fingers. Now, what tends to happen for many people is that they try to depress the keys exclusively with their fingers, which for reasons I just explained can often lead to inconsistencies. Certain notes play before others, some notes are played too loud or too soft, and so on. But there are a couple of things we can consider when playing these to help prevent those issues. First is timing. And that may seem a little strange given that we just spent a lot of time talking about the physiology of the hands. However, having a clear image in your head of exactly when your third should be happening will go a long way towards keeping them from sounding messy and indistinct. So let's take a quick look at the first bar of this piece. You can see that our thirds are happening as 16th notes, which the first 16th being a rest to make way for the bass note in the left hand. So the first thing to do here is to establish your beat and make sure you're clear about those 16th note subdivisions. 1 E enter, 2 E enter, 1 E enter, 2 E enter, 1 E enter, 2 E enter, 1 E enter, 2 E enter. And then, either by snapping with your left hand as you play with your right, or by using a metronome, you can just play a single line of these notes in that timing to get a feel for it on the keyboard. Like that. And you shouldn't have to do too much of this to solidify it, but it is a necessary step if you really want to achieve clarity with those thirds. Now, the second thing to think about is, yes, your hand positioning and configuration at the keyboard. And one thing that I've often felt makes playing these thirds significantly easier is to try and retain the position and structure of your hand as it rests on the keys. So go ahead and put your hand back into that close position on the white notes, being sure that you're exercising those good hand position techniques you learned back when you were first starting. Then, freeze your hand. Pull it up off the keyboard and rotate it around using your wrist and forearm, being sure to keep the structure of your curved fingers intact. This may take a couple of attempts, so feel free to pause the video here and try this with both hands until you feel you've been successful. Now, the idea here is that you have control of this curved structure and you can relocate it and keep it together as you move around playing these thirds figures. This will give you greater consistency and greater what we call contact with the keyboard. Part of the unevenness that ends up affecting how well we play consecutive thirds often comes from us thinking too much about playing with our independent fingers instead of with the singular structure of the curved hand backed by the wrist. Now, a quick note here. You should not be achieving this structure through tension in your fingers. You can position and keep your hand this way with very minimal effort, so if your finger joints are locked and your wrist has no flex, this is the incorrect way of doing it, and you can risk injury by doing it like this too much. We don't want this, we want this. It's more about keeping your fingers together horizontally rather than vertically. This would be vertically if my fingers were down along the keys, which the combination of gravity and the boundary of the keys will help us to accomplish when we're actually in position. All we want is for the fingers that are supposed to be playing to reach just enough into the keys with a little help from the wrist, and to have the rest of the fingers relax around them, in position, ready to make their move next. I'll do a quick demo using the opening figure in the right hand to give you an idea how this should look, and then also show you what a less effective, more fingery approach might look like. So, from the first 4 bars. Okay, so you can really see, especially with the overhead view, how my hand keeps its position and the thirds come off cleanly and evenly. Now let me try and demonstrate with a more fingery version what that might look like. And you can immediately see that it looks like a lot more work with a lot more moving parts, and it is. And whenever you have more moving parts like that, the chances that some of them are going to work less than totally well together gets higher. As with many things piano-related, the solution is often one in which you are doing less with your motions, not more.